You slide into a tube. Nothing cuts you. Nothing pierces your skin. 30 minutes later, doctors see your brain, your spine, your torn ligament, the tumor hiding in soft tissue. No incision, no blood, just images sharp enough to count vessels and track damage millimeter by millimeter. How? The machine reads water. Not with light, not with sound, with magnets strong enough to yank a wrench across a room and quantum physics buried so deep inside. Hydrogen atoms that even the people who built the first scanners didn't fully grasp what they were manipulating. This is the reason MRI can see inside you without cutting, and the story is far stranger than you imagine. The molecules flipped. Not metaphorically. Their nuclei physically changed orientation when the frequency matched. Robbie detected it. He called the effect magnetic resonance, and it happened at such a small scale that most people figured it would stay in physics labs forever. Robbie himself said decades later, right before he died in 1988, that when he was placed inside an MRI scanner, it felt eerie to see his own body through. Technology born from experiments he ran on beams of atoms. He never thought his work would come to this. Any material with the right kind of nucleus will respond. Hydrogen becomes the focus because hydrogen is everywhere in the human body. 63% of your atoms are hydrogen. Water is 2 hydrogen atoms bonded to oxygen. Fat contains hydrogen. Nearly every tissue you have is rich in hydrogen. This matters because hydrogen nuclei are just single protons, and protons have a property called spin. A proton doesn't spin like a top. Spin is a quantum mechanical property, a kind of intrinsic angular momentum that makes the proton behave like a tiny magnet with a north and south pole. In 1960, Hermann Carr produces a one-dimensional nuclear magnetic resonance spectrum in his Harvard thesis. In 1960, Vladislav Ivanov in the Soviet Union files a patent application for a magnetic resonance imaging device, the first documented proposal to turn resonance into pictures. The idea goes nowhere. No one knows how to build it. Article, Magnetic Resonance Imaging, the Nuclear Option, published in Clinical Gastroenterology and Hepatology in 2018, and the Physics of Magnetic Resonance Imaging Technical Documentation, maintained by Oxford University's fMRIB Analysis Group, last updated 2 weeks ago in November 2025. These are primary source technical references used by MRI physicists and medical researchers globally. Now back to the information. 1969. Raymond Damadian, a physician at State University of New York Downstate Medical Center in Brooklyn, proposes a magnetic resonance body scanner to the Human Research Council of New York City. He's been studying sodium and potassium in living cells. He discovers that when he applies nuclear magnetic resonance to tissue samples, cancerous cells and normal cells produce different relaxation times. Relaxation time is how long it takes hydrogen nuclei to return to equilibrium after being knocked out of alignment by a radio pulse. Cancer tissue takes longer. The difference is measurable. Damadian publishes this in Science in 1971. He files a patent in 1972. Patent number 3,789,832. Granted, February 5th, 1974. The patent describes using nuclear magnetic resonance to scan the human body to locate cancerous tissue. It doesn't explain how to generate pictures, just how to detect differences in tissue. He uses magnetic field gradients to encode spatial information into the signal. Gradients make the magnetic field slightly stronger on one side than the other, so hydrogen nuclei at different locations resonate at slightly different frequencies. You can then use those frequency differences to figure out where each signal came from. This is the breakthrough that turns resonance from a one-point measurement into an image. Lauterber's paper doesn't cite Damadian's 1971 Science paper directly, though it references other works that do cite Damadian. The omission starts a conflict that will last decades. Before Mansfield's work, a single magnetic resonance image takes hours to acquire. Mansfield's technique drops that time to seconds. He uses rapid switching of magnetic field gradients to capture data much faster. The images are clearer. The method becomes the foundation for modern fast MRI sequences. Being at SUNY Downstate Medical Center. The subject is Minkoff, Damadian's postgraduate assistant. The scan takes 4 hours and 57 minutes. It produces an image of Minkoff's chest, showing his heart, lungs, vertebrae, and musculature. The machine is called Indomitable. Damadian built it himself with a superconducting magnet in his laboratory. The image is crude by modern standards, but it proves the concept works on a living human body. They published the results in 1977. The scan identifies a primary tumor in the patient's chest. This is the moment magnetic resonance imaging transitions from research tool to diagnostic instrument. The first commercial MRI scanner is produced by Phonar Corporation in 1980. Phonar is Damadian's company, founded in 1978. The acronym stands for Field Focused Nuclear Magnetic Resonance. Phonar introduces the first mobile MRI, designed for intensive care units and emergency settings where moving the patient is dangerous. 1986. Charles Dumoulin and Howard Hart at General Electric developed magnetic resonance angiography, a way to image blood vessels without injecting contrast dye. Denis Le Bihan obtains the first diffusion MRI images and later patents the technique. Diffusion MRI tracks the movement of water molecules in tissue and becomes critical for diagnosing strokes and mapping brain white matter tracks. Functional MRI revolutionizes neuroscience because it lets researchers see which parts of the brain activate during specific tasks. The early 1990s bring diffusion tensor imaging and tractography, techniques for visualizing nerve fiber pathways in the brain, developed by Peter Basser and Le Bihan at the National Institutes of Health, and by Aaron Filler, Franklin Howe, and colleagues. The Nobel Committee announces the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. Recipients: Paul Lauterbur and Peter Mansfield for their discoveries concerning magnetic resonance imaging. Raymond Damadian is excluded. The Nobel rules allow up to 3 recipients. Damadian is not among them. Between October and November 2003, a group called the Friends of Raymond Damadian, formed by Phonar, takes out full-page advertisements in the New Yorks Times twice, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, and one of Sweden's largest newspapers. The headline reads, "The shameful wrong that must be righted." Damadian claims that if he had not been born, MRI would not have existed. Lauterbur and Mansfield expanded on techniques, but Damadian conceived the medical application, discovered tissue relaxation differences, and built the first human scanner. The Nobel Committee does not reverse its decision. The controversy persists. The Lancet Medical Journal publishes an article in January 2004 calling the exclusion puzzling and sad. The United States Supreme Court in 1997 upholds Damadian's 1974 patent after legal battles. A $62 million judgment against General Electric follows. Lauterbur dies in March 2007 at age 77. Damadian dies August 3, 2022 at age 86. The Nobel archives from 2003 will open in 2053. Until then, the full reasoning remains sealed. Most of those hydrogen atoms sit inside water molecules and fat molecules. A hydrogen nucleus is a single proton. That proton has spin 1/2 specifically. This isn't a metaphor. The proton possesses an intrinsic angular momentum that quantum mechanics describes with a spin quantum number of 1/2. Because the proton is charged and spinning, it generates a magnetic field. Every hydrogen nucleus in your body is a tiny magnet. Under normal conditions, these tiny magnets point in random directions. Their magnetic fields cancel each other out. No net magnetization. You place a person inside an MRI scanner. The scanner contains a superconducting electromagnet producing a static magnetic field. Clinical MRI scanners typically operate at 1.5 Tesla or 3 Tesla. Some research scanners reach 7 Tesla or higher. For reference, the Earth's magnetic field at the surface is 0.00005 Tesla. A refrigerator magnet is about 0.001 Tesla. An MRI magnet is thousands of times stronger. The strongest continuous magnetic field ever recorded by humans is 45.5 Tesla, achieved at the National High Magnetic Field Laboratory in Florida in June 2019, using a combination of superconducting and resistive magnets. Clinical MRI magnets are 30,000 times stronger than Earth's field. They wobble. This wobbling is called precession. A proton precesses around the magnetic field axis like a spinning top wobbles around the direction of gravity. The frequency of this precession is called the Larmor frequency. It depends on the strength of the magnetic field and a constant called the gyromagnetic ratio. For hydrogen, the gyromagnetic ratio is 42.58 million cycles per second per Tesla. At 1.5 Tesla, hydrogen protons precess at 63.87 million cycles per second. At 3 Tesla, 85 million cycles per second. Those are radio frequencies. FM radio uses frequencies between 88 and 108 million cycles per second. MRI operates in the same range. This is why the machine uses radio waves to interact with your body. The scanner sends a radio frequency pulse at exactly the Larmor frequency. When the frequency matches, the hydrogen nuclei absorb energy from the radio wave. This knocks the net magnetization away from the z-axis. A 90-degree pulse tips the magnetization completely into the transverse plane perpendicular to the main field. Now the magnetization is rotating in that plane at the Larmor frequency. A rotating magnetic field generates an oscillating electrical signal in a nearby coil of wire. The scanner's receiver coil picks up this signal. This is the magnetic resonance signal. Different tissues have different T1 values. T1 for fat is about 250 milliseconds at 1.5 Tesla. T1 for cerebrospinal fluid is about 4,000 milliseconds. T2 relaxation, also called transverse relaxation or spin-spin relaxation, is the loss of coherence in the transverse plane. Individual protons precess at slightly different rates because of tiny local variations in the magnetic field caused by neighboring atoms and molecules. These phase differences accumulate, and the transverse magnetization decays. T2 for fat is about 80 milliseconds. T2 for cerebrospinal fluid is about 2,000 milliseconds. If you emphasize T2 differences, fluid appears bright. Damadian's 1971 discovery was that cancerous tissue has longer T1 and T2 relaxation times than normal tissue. This difference provides the signal that makes tumor detection possible. A gradient coil creates a magnetic field that varies linearly across space. If the main field is 3 Tesla and you apply a gradient, the field might be 3.001 Tesla on one side of the patient and 2.999 Tesla on the other side. The Larmor frequency changes with field strength. Protons on the 3.001 Tesla side precess slightly faster. Protons on the 2.999 Tesla side precess slightly slower. The frequency of the received signal tells you where the signal came from along the direction of the gradient, showing the spatial distribution of hydrogen nuclei and their relaxation properties. This mathematical space where you collect the frequency-encoded data is called K-space, Richard Leix's 1979 patent. Modern MRI image reconstruction relies entirely on this framework. This creates enormous mechanical forces inside the magnet. The gradients interact with the main magnetic field and produce a force that tries to move the gradient coils. The coils vibrate. The vibrations create sound waves. This is why MRI scanners are loud. The knocking sound you hear during a scan is the gradient coils physically vibrating against the structure of the magnet. The sound reaches 100 decibels or more, equivalent to a chainsaw. Patients wear hearing protection. You can pass enormous currents through the coil and generate extremely strong magnetic fields without consuming continuous power. Most clinical MRI magnets are cooled to about 4 Kelvin, which is minus 269 degrees Celsius or minus 452 degrees Fahrenheit. The coolant is liquid helium. Liquid helium boils at 4.2 Kelvin. The magnet is wrapped in layers of thermal insulation inside a vessel called a cryostat. Once the magnet is energized, it maintains its field indefinitely as long as it stays cold. The only ongoing energy cost is running the refrigeration system to keep the helium liquid. Modern magnets use zero boil-off systems with cryocoolers that recondense evaporated helium, creating a closed loop. These systems need helium refills only after a quench event. A quench is an emergency shutdown where the superconducting wire suddenly returns to normal resistive state. All the energy stored in the magnetic field converts to heat in seconds. The helium boils off rapidly. The magnet loses its field. Quenches are rare but serious. A typical 3 Tesla whole-body MRI magnet stores roughly 10 million joules of energy. Quenching that energy heats the helium so fast that it vaporizes explosively. Venting systems direct the helium gas safely outside the building. Attraction can extend 3 to 4 meters from the magnet bore. Many MRI facilities paint a 5-Gauss line on the floor to mark the boundary. Beyond that line, metal objects become projectiles. The tank strikes Michael in the head, causing skull fractures and intracranial hemorrhage. He dies. The incident leads to widespread changes in MRI safety protocols and the establishment of the annual MRI Safety Week, 2003. A Brazilian man takes a loaded firearm into an MRI room while accompanying his mother. The magnet pulls the gun from his waistband. A shot fires when the gun hits the scanner. The bullet strikes the man in the abdomen. Fatal injury. These are not isolated incidents. A survey of 46 MRI facilities in 1999 finds that 52% report MRI-related accidents. Objects involved include intravenous poles, toolboxes, sandbags containing metal filings, vacuum cleaners, mop buckets, defibrillators, wheelchairs. 5 incidents with oxygen or nitrous oxide tanks. 1 causes facial fractures. A study of Japanese medical accident reports from 9 years extracts 172 incidents involving ferromagnetic objects in MRI rooms. Pacemakers are the most common device, 22 cases. 33% of incidents involve staff with less than 5 years of experience. 70% of incidents are attributed to failure to check for metal. Zone 1 is unrestricted public access. Zone 2 is the area where patients are greeted and screened. Zone 3 is the area just outside the magnet room, restricted to screened individuals. Zone 4 is the magnet room itself, the projectile zone. No one enters Zone 4 without metal screening. Patients must remove all metallic items: jewelry, piercings, belts, hairpins, coins, keys, watches. Accompanying family members must be screened exactly like patients. Medical staff bringing equipment near the scanner must verify that every item is MRI safe or MRI conditional. The device's label specifies the limits. MRI unsafe means significantly ferromagnetic and poses a clear threat. Aneurysm clips, cochlear implants, older pacemakers. These are contraindications. November 1992, the FDA reports an incident where a patient with an undisclosed cerebral aneurysm clip dies during an MRI exam. The clip moves in the magnetic field, lacerating the middle cerebral artery. Several deaths occur in patients with pacemakers who undergo MRI without appropriate precautions. Modern MRI conditional pacemakers exist, but require specific scanning protocols. Metal tattoo ink containing iron oxide can heat during scanning, causing burns. Large tattoos with loops or circular patterns pose higher risk. Thermal burns from RF energy are the most commonly reported adverse event in the FDA's MAUD incident reporting system. The RF pulses heat tissue. If a conductive loop forms, such as skin-to-skin contact between crossed legs or arms, current can flow and concentrate heat at the contact point. Severe burns result. RF energy induces currents that can damage the device or heat surrounding tissue. Patients with these devices either cannot have MRI or require special protocols and field strength limits. Some patients cannot tolerate it. Open MRI systems exist with lower field strengths, typically 0.2 to 0.55 Tesla, trading image quality for patient comfort. Wide-bore scanners increase the bore diameter to 70 or 80 centimeters, but require more superconducting wire and experience higher peak fields in the coils. The field strength must increase by 0.1 Tesla. For every centimeter, the bore is shortened or widened. While maintaining image quality, this drives up cost. And site requirements. Site preparation includes reinforcing floors to support the magnet's weight, often several tons, and ensuring electromagnetic shielding to prevent the fringe field from affecting nearby electronics. The fringe field can disrupt pacemakers, erase credit card magnetic strips, and damage mechanical watches meters away from the scanner. Approximately 60 million MRI scans are performed worldwide each year as of recent counts. In the United States alone, roughly 40 million scans annually. 75% of clinical scanners operate at 1.5 Tesla. 3 Tesla scanners provide higher signal-to-noise ratio and better resolution, but cost more and have stricter safety margins for RF heating. 7 Tesla and 9.4 Tesla scanners exist for research, offering unprecedented anatomical detail, but requiring extremely careful safety protocols and longer scan times due to altered tissue properties at ultra-high fields. One-weighted images. Contrast agents help visualize blood vessels, tumors, inflammation, and areas of blood-brain barrier breakdown. Gadolinium itself is toxic. The contrast agent binds gadolinium to a chelating molecule that the kidneys can excrete. Most patients tolerate gadolinium contrast well. Patients with severe kidney disease risk nephrogenic systemic fibrosis, a rare but serious condition where gadolinium deposits in tissues. Screening for kidney function is standard before contrast administration. Allergic reactions occur but are much less common than with iodinated CT contrast. Their photon energy is millions of times too low to break chemical bonds or ionize atoms. The magnetic fields are static or switch at frequencies far below those that cause cellular harm. This makes MRI the preferred modality for imaging children, pregnant women after the first trimester, and patients requiring repeated scans over time. Classical physics cannot explain why a proton behaves like a magnet. Classical physics cannot explain discrete energy levels and resonance. Quantum mechanics is required. The proton's spin is quantized. It can only exist in certain states. In a magnetic field, a spin one-half particle like a proton has 2 allowed orientations. Parallel to the field, lower energy, or anti-parallel, higher energy. The energy difference between these states is proportional to the magnetic field strength and equals the energy of a photon at the Larmor frequency. This is the Zeeman effect. It exists in a superposition, a quantum mechanical mixture of both states. The wave function describes this. The probability of finding the proton in one state or the other depends on the coefficients in the wave function. When you measure, the wave function collapses to one state. But during MRI, you're not measuring individual protons, you're measuring billions of protons collectively. Their average behavior follows classical equations of motion. The expectation value of their total magnetization precesses around the magnetic field exactly as a classical magnetic dipole would. The spin-up spin-down system obeys the same math as classical magnetic resonance. The Bloch equations describe the motion of magnetization under the influence of magnetic fields and relaxation. These equations are classical but accurately predict MRI behavior because the ensemble of protons behaves classically even though individual protons are quantum. MRI technologists and physicians don't need to think about quantum mechanics day to day. The classical picture works, but the underlying reality is quantum. When these fluctuations have components at the Larmor frequency, they induce transitions between spin states driving relaxation. T2, relaxation, arises from dephasing. Local field inhomogeneities cause each proton to precess at a slightly different rate. The phases spread out. Coherence is lost. This is partly quantum, partly classical. Pure quantum dephasing occurs from spin-spin interactions. Classical inhomogeneities also contribute. Chemical shift is a quantum effect. Electrons surrounding the nucleus generate their own small magnetic fields that shield the nucleus from the external field. The effective field felt by the nucleus depends on the electron density, which depends on the chemical bonds. Different molecules produce different resonance frequencies, even in the same external field. In MRI, fat and water resonate at slightly different frequencies because of chemical shift. This difference is a few parts per million. At 3 Tesla, the frequency difference between fat and water is about 430 Hz. Sequences can exploit this to separate fat and water signals, producing fat-suppressed images or water-only images. Water molecules undergo Brownian motion, constantly colliding with other molecules and changing direction. In free fluid like cerebrospinal fluid, diffusion is isotropic, equally likely in all directions. In structured tissue like white matter, cell membranes and axon bundles restrict diffusion. Water diffuses more easily along axons than across them. Diffusion MRI encodes this information by applying strong gradient pulses that make the signal sensitive to the distance water molecules travel. Restricted diffusion produces brighter signal. Diffusion tensor imaging measures diffusion in multiple directions and reconstructs the 3-dimensional orientation of white matter tracks, allowing visualization of brain connectivity. Active neurons consume oxygen. Blood flow increases to active regions to deliver more oxygenated blood. Oxygenated hemoglobin is diamagnetic. Deoxygenated hemoglobin is paramagnetic. The ratio affects local magnetic field homogeneity and T2 star relaxation. When a brain region activates, the increased oxygenated blood reduces the deoxyhemoglobin concentration, lengthening T2 star and increasing signal. This is the blood oxygen level dependent effect, bold signal. Seiji Ogawa's 1990 discovery. Functional MRI has spatial resolution of a few millimeters and temporal resolution of a few seconds, making it the dominant tool for non-invasive human brain mapping. Peaks in the spectrum correspond to different metabolites. You can measure concentrations of N-acetylaspartate, creatine, choline, lactate, and other compounds. This provides biochemical information. High choline often indicates tumor. High lactate indicates anaerobic metabolism. MR spectroscopy is used clinically for brain tumors, metabolic disorders, and stroke. Parallel imaging uses multiple receiver coils with different spatial sensitivities. By combining data from all coils, you can acquire images faster or with higher resolution. Techniques like SENSE and GRAPPA became standard in clinical practice in the 2000s. Compressed sensing, introduced in the 2010s, exploits sparsity in images to undersample K-space and still reconstruct high-quality images, further reducing scan time. Real-time MRI sequences can now image the heart beating, joints moving, and speech articulation, all without gating or breath holding. The advantage is superior soft tissue contrast compared to CT or ultrasound. The disadvantage is the complexity and cost of adapting interventional tools to the MRI environment. Portable MRI systems are being developed for field use. Low-field scanners that can be transported and operated without cryogenic cooling, using permanent magnets or resistive electromagnets at 0.1 to 0.2 Tesla. Image quality is lower, but the portability makes them useful in remote settings or developing regions. What makes MRI truly strange is that the reason it works sits at the intersection of scales we cannot see. Protons are 0.00000000000000001 meters across. Quantum effects at that scale produce signals detectable with coils of wire you can hold. Magnetic fields generated by currents and wires cooled to near absolute zero align nuclei one by one across kilograms of tissue. Radio waves, tuned to frequencies that depend on field strength to 8 significant figures, flip billions of spins in synchrony. Mathematics, invented to describe waves, transforms the resulting signal into pictures sharp enough for surgeons to plan operations millimeter by millimeter. Raymond Vest Damadian, a decade ago, compiled with access to patents, timelines, and legal documents. The review confirms that Damadian conceived the medical application in 1969, proved the concept with tissue relaxation measurements in 1971, patented the method in 1974, and achieved the first human scan in 1977. Lauterbur solved the imaging problem in 1973. Mansfield accelerated acquisition in the late 1970s. All 3 contributions are essential. The Nobel rules allow 3 recipients. The committee chose 2. Damadian's supporters argue his exclusion was deliberate. His detractors argue his early methods were clinically unreliable. Both sides cite evidence. The Nobel Committee never comments publicly on its deliberations. In 2018, the National Science Foundation notes that Damadian's patent included the idea of using nuclear magnetic resonance to scan the human body to locate cancerous tissue, but did not describe a method for generating pictures from such a scan. That distinction goes to Lauterbur. Paul Lauterbur dies of kidney disease March 27, 2007, at his home in Urbana, Illinois, age 77. Peter Mansfield continues work on MRI until his retirement and dies February 8, 2017, at age 83. Raymond Damadian dies August 3, 2022, at age 86. The first MRI machine, Indomitable, is now in the Smithsonian Institution. Building at Stony Brook University. The American Chemical Society designated the Stony Brook Chemistry Department as a National Historic Chemical Landmark in 2011 in recognition of Lauterbur's work. Oxford Instruments, the company that developed the first superconducting magnets for MRI in the 1970s, remains a major supplier of MRI hardware. Over 80% of superconducting magnet production in the global market is for MRI systems. Economic activity dependent on superconductivity worldwide reached approximately $6 billion in 2014, with MRI accounting for about 80% of that total. Moriel Nessiver, a physicist and assistant professor of radiology at the University of Maryland, demonstrates the dangers of bringing metal objects near MRI scanners on Good Morning America by showing ferromagnetic items being violently pulled toward the magnet. 2012. An off-duty police officer brings his firearm into an MRI scanning room in New York State due to miscommunication. The weapon is pulled from his grasp and becomes pinned to the magnet. Fortunately, no discharge. The incident highlights that even trained security personnel can make errors if not specifically educated about MRI safety. They log incidents and find that 15.5% are MRI safety related, with the remaining majority involving booking errors and other operational issues. 10% of logged incidents involve unexpected implants or foreign bodies detected on images. 3% involve foreign metal objects brought into the scanner room. Alert reports emphasize the need for vigilance regarding patient clothing, particularly technical garments, with metallic fibers or attachments, and the importance of authorized personnel supervising access to controlled areas. Near-miss events are reportable. A nurse attempting to bring equipment into the magnet room is successfully challenged by the radiographer. No accident occurs, but the report goes into the system to prevent future lapses. Years finds 172 involving ferromagnetic objects in MRI rooms. Nurses file 44.8% of reports. Physicians file 19.8%. 70% of incidents result from failure to check properly for metal. Staff with less than 5 years of experience account for 33% of cases. The most common ferromagnetic device is pacemakers, implanted before modern MRI conditional models became available. Orthopedic surgeons, who frequently order MRI but may lack detailed safety training, are reminded to proactively confirm device safety using patient medical records and prior imaging rather than relying solely on patient questionnaires. Patients do not always know or remember the specifics of their implants. A typical MRI unit generates $500,000 in annual profit. The cost of a metal detector is 1 month's profit. Installation is straightforward. The detector cannot replace the screening questionnaire because it may not detect small implanted objects like aneurysm clips or pacemakers, but it adds a layer of protection against environmental metal and jewelry that patients forget to remove. Some facilities use ferromagnetic detection wands similar to airport security wands. Effectiveness depends on the diligence of the operator and the sensitivity of the device. The long-term health effects are unknown. The FDA issued warnings in 2017. Some contrast agents retain more gadolinium than others. Macrocyclic agents are more stable and release less gadolinium. Linear agents are less stable. Recommendations now favor macrocyclic agents, especially for patients requiring multiple contrast scans over their lifetime. Children and pregnant women are particular concerns. Some centers use gadolinium only when absolutely necessary and explore alternative imaging strategies when possible. Carbon-13 or xenon-129 gas is hyperpolarized using lasers and then injected or inhaled. The resulting signal is enormously stronger, allowing real-time metabolic imaging or lung ventilation imaging. The hyperpolarized state decays within seconds to minutes, so imaging must be fast, but the applications are powerful. Clinical trials are underway. Early MRI systems operated at 0.05 to 0.2 Tesla. Higher fields won out because they provide better signal-to-noise and shorter scan times. But low-field systems have advantages. They are cheaper, smaller, require no cryogenics if using permanent magnets or resistive electromagnets, and have fewer safety concerns. Recent advances in reconstruction algorithms and machine learning are making low-field MRI clinically viable again. Portable systems that fit in ambulances or rural clinics could democratize access to MRI in regions that cannot afford 3 Tesla superconducting scanners. Image quality is lower, but sufficient for many applications. Stroke detection, joint injuries, basic neuroimaging. This is the frontier now. Field strength from 0.05 to 0.55. Tesla using permanent magnets or switched electromagnets, operated without liquid helium, reconstructed with artificial intelligence to compensate for low signal. Different tissues contain different amounts of water, different amounts of fat, different molecular structures that affect how fast hydrogen nuclei relax. The machine translates these differences into shades of gray. Bone appears black because compact bone has very little hydrogen. Cortical bone is mostly calcium and phosphorus. Fat appears bright on T1 weighted images. Cerebrospinal fluid appears bright on T2 weighted images. Muscle is intermediate. Tumors are often bright on T2 because they have high water content. The only discomfort is lying still in a confined space and hearing the loud banging of the gradient coils. You slide out 30 minutes later. Doctors have images of your internal organs in 3 dimensions with submillimeter resolution. They can see plaques in arteries, tumors in soft tissue, torn cartilage in your knee, lesions in your brain, the structure of your unborn child's developing organs. This is possible because a physicist in 1944 fired molecules through a magnetic field and noticed they absorbed radio waves at a specific frequency. Because 2 physicists in 1946 realized nuclei in solids and liquids do the same thing. Because a physician in 1969 thought tumors might respond differently and tested it. Because a chemist in 1973 figured out how to encode space into the signal. Because a physicist in the late 1970s made it fast. Because materials scientists in the 1950s and 60s developed superconductors that could be wound into coils and cooled to 4 Kelvin without quenching. Because engineers built cryostats and gradient coils and RF coils and computers powerful enough to do Fourier transforms in seconds instead of hours. Because regulatory bodies and safety experts created protocols to keep patients and staff safe around magnetic fields that could pull metal across rooms. Magnetization you can measure with a coil of wire. The reason MRI can see inside you without cutting is not just magnets. It's not just radio waves. It's quantum mechanics, translated through superconductivity and signal processing, and decades of iterative refinement operating on hydrogen nuclei in your tissue to produce images that would have seemed like magic 90 years ago. And the strangest part is, it works, because the universe, at its smallest scale, follows rules we still don't fully understand. Rules that let particles exist in superpositions of states. Rules that let magnetic fields flip spins. Rules that let those flips generate signals we can detect. MRI is a window into quantum reality made practical. Every scan proves that the bizarre rules of quantum mechanics aren't just theoretical. They're real, they're in your body, and they're keeping you alive by letting doctors see inside without ever picking up a scalpel.